On every duck's favorite holiday, dime polishing day, Scrooge McDuck tells the duck tale of how he got his #1 dime and became the world's richest duck. Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hello, everyone.
And this week we're going to be doing a listener request and I think a cartoon that is maybe more popular with the tail end of our demographic than maybe people in our age group, just based on when it came out.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say.
I think even it might be popular with the quote-unquote millennial set.
Is that so?
I would think so. I mean, if they start in 1980, and this was started in 87, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Well, even so, we're going to do it anyway, even if it is popular with millennials. We're not going to hold that against it.
You can't, when someone's born, you can't hold when someone's born against them, can you?
I certainly don't want to, and I know that we've often celebrated our 2 to 11-year-old demographic, and I think last season we spent a lot of time celebrating our senior citizen demographic, and a lot of times people in the middle might feel a little squeezed out, so maybe this is a way to reach out to some of them.
That's right. But this should also appeal to 2 to 11-year-olds.
I would think so. I think it has universal appeal for many reasons.
Yeah, maybe senior citizens too, since the lead character is a senior citizen.
Exactly.
It's DuckTales, and Rick has a little something to read from our listener Gino about why he requested this.
Yes, our friend of the show, Gino, he's been on our Facebook group, which, again, I'd like to remind everyone, if you want to come join us, it's easy to join, and Battle of the Network shows on Facebook, and we just like to talk about television from the era, and a lot of times we'd love to get requests, and if it's feasible for us to look in the show, love to give it a shot. And I asked Gino to maybe give us some thoughts about DuckTales since he suggested that we cover it sometime. And I'd like to share with you what Gino told us, because I think he does a really good job of summarizing the appeal of the show for him specifically, but I think this applies probably to a lot of people out there. So he said, "Thanks for reaching out. Asking me to name my favorite DuckTales episode is like asking a mom to name her favorite child. The show is always very consistent in quality, but off the top of my head, the ones that come to mind are The Treasure of the Golden Sun's pilot movie that established the characters and does a great job of introducing the viewer to the world of the show. Now, unfortunately, Gino adds that it's much better in its original movie version, because the syndicated episode cuts that appear on Disney Plus and even on the DVDs, it sort of breaks the flow of the story. So we didn't cover that episode, but Gino's recommendation is still out there. He says, the only other one I can think of is the Super DuckTales TV movie that introduced Gizmo Duck. But again, the original movie version is preferred, as Disney Plus only has the syndicated cut, which is unfortunate. But he says, as far as a comment on the show, it was a favorite of mine growing up. Watching it on VHS, I especially grew attached to the Scrooge McDuck character, and he quickly became my favorite Disney character overall. The Scrooge comics are legendary and well worth the read for anyone interested in adventure stories. Treasure of the Golden Suns does a great job of emulating the comics. I also must discuss the DuckTales feature, released to theaters in 1990. It was a childhood favorite and holds up very well 30 years later. The voice cast is golden era for me. Alan Young, Russi Taylor, June Foray, and even Hal Smith, top talent in any era. Not too keen on the reboot, the less said of it, the better. He says, aside from containing one of the best theme songs in television history, the original DuckTales was filled with a magic and charm that proliferated through Disney in the 1980s and early 90s and is sadly missing from the company's current output. The 80s was a golden era for Disney, one that I sorely miss. Long live the Disney afternoon and all of the great shows, toys, and memories that are still pop culture icons today.
Clearly had a big effect on Gino.
Yeah, very well said. And actually, I've got an Uncle Scrooge little figure looking over us today.
Yeah, he's looking right at me.
Yeah, he's got his eye on you, Mike.
Yeah, I don't know what he would think of podcasting, given how unprofitable it is.
Yeah, probably not good margins in that. But it seems like a lot of Scrooge businesses, I always got the impression that he relies on revenue and isn't as concerned with margins. So maybe he would give it a shot if he thought he could make it worth his while in volume. But
yeah. I've seen a couple episodes of the new one, and I'm not wild about the look of it, but, the stories seem fine, from what I can tell, but I'm not a super fan like Gino.
Yeah.
They might even have an episode about podcasting.
Oh, yeah.
was my point.
Well, I do like the fact that they're attempting to keep the characters alive and in the consciousness. I don't know what Scrooge McDuck would think about syndication edits being on Disney Plus, but he might be a little disappointed, but he might respect them economizing a little bit, not putting in the work that they need to. I think one of the reasons, it's a little bit complicated, but the pilot movie that launched DuckTales, it aired in syndication as a movie and then was shown later in the season. After a lot of the episodes in the first season, it was shown in parts, and that's what he's referring to. And it's in that form that it's on Disney Plus for some reason. And some episodes are out of order. I think there's a couple of episodes still missing. So it's not the perfect representation of the show, I'm sure, but at least it is on there if you got Disney Plus, and many people do. At least it's out there where you can see most of the series.
Yeah. Now, I remember when this first started, it is... Again, I was probably a little beyond the cartoon range at that point, and yet I still watch it a little bit. But I have to say, I wasn't super familiar with the whole world of Scrooge McDuck, and I didn't know it was this really rich thing until the last, 10, 15 years when I learned about the comics and this tradition and how, among comics people, how revered, especially Carl Barks is, but later Don Rosa, although he started a little bit right around the same time as these cartoons, so I don't know that he would have been influencing them. But, I think I knew, I don't even know if I've seen Mickey's Christmas Carol, but I knew who Scrooge McDuck was. I didn't have a real connection to that. And I didn't read the comics growing up. So I don't know if I had a huge interest, or I was like, I didn't know there was a history of ducks going on adventures. Maybe I just thought it was an Indiana Jones riff. And when really Indiana Jones is a riff on, at least partially a riff on Uncle Scrooge stories and Donald Duck stories.
Yeah.
So what about you?
I never watched DuckTales growing up, or when it was originally on. I remember the theme song. I remember it being a thing, but I don't think I really sat down and watched too many episodes of it. And part of it was I had a lot of inherent bias against it, because my favorite Disney character growing up was Donald Duck. And in the cartoons, I was very annoyed by Huey, Dewey, and Louie. I saw them as like antagonists and just trying to mess with Donald. And granted, a lot of times Donald would do things to agitate them. And, there was some wrongdoing all around perhaps, but I was always blaming Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and I thought they were annoying characters. I thought they were young characters that Donald didn't need, and I resented the fact that they were in cartoons with him.
Donald needs someone to agitate him, or he's not appealing, right? I mean, his whole appeal is that he gets agitated. Maybe not his whole appeal, but a great deal of his appeal.
Well, I may enjoy what he does, but a lot of times, too, Donald was stooging for them, and it's not like he got the best of him. He wasn't like an underdog who, was getting agitated against wealthy robber barons or something like that, or bank robbers. It was like his nephews that were provoking him and usually getting the best of him and making Donald look like an idiot.
So I'm going to guess you don't like Chip and Dale either.
Oh, I could not, no. And I haven't gotten to Rescue Rangers yet. I never watched that, but Chip and Dale were much worse for me than Huey, Louie, and Dewey. So I had a little bit of a thing against them until I started reading the comic books, some of the comics. And I remember a collection I had Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and they were actually pretty cool. And the Carl Barks stories, the characterization of Donald was a lot different. He was actually usually a voice of reason, and Uncle Scrooge was a lot more cantankerous than he is, I think, in this cartoon series. And the kids were more sensible, and it just seemed to be more, okay, the adventure stories and everything was a little bit different. Whereas the characterization of Donald in the cartoons was more, unhinged and everything like that. But I enjoyed the comics, and Uncle Scrooge working with Donald and Huey, Louie, and Dewey was pretty cool. I was a little disappointed when DuckTales came out and Donald wasn't in it. And I kind of thought, well, why isn't Donald in it? And I think that's something else that kind of turned me off and was a little bit of a barrier for me to get into it. But it took me a while to really read more of like the old Uncle Scrooge. But once I did, I was like, okay, these are great. And, the character is awesome, and kind of like the expanded Duck universe with Gyro Gear Loose and all the Gladstone Gander and all these other characters. I love that stuff. But I was more of a comic Duck fan, and the cartoons, it was maybe more hit or miss trying to find them and seeing them. So really for me, it was in just being not quite the right age to watch these in the afternoons, and I was probably more likely to be watching pro wrestling or something like that when this was on a weekday afternoon. So this is totally new for me to go into DuckTales. I haven't watched hardly any of these in years, and it's only now having Disney Plus that I'm really kind of looking at the series. I'm looking at it with really kind of fresh eyes.
I think it's unique too for that period. I mean, while any Disney product is ultimately also being merchandised in a way, this wasn't driven by merchandise. I'm sure they made plenty of stuff, but it wasn't like G.I. Joe or He-Man or
right.
Most of these cartoons we've talked about. It was them taking all these ideas that had been built up in these comics, and that's part of it too. From what I can tell, Uncle Scrooge, other than Mickey's Christmas Carol, had been in like one or two other shorts, and really was not an animated character at all. Besides that, and he'd been on a couple of records, but he really existed in the comics. And Carl Barks and others, but Carl Barks especially, invented this character and developed him and came up with this story and the tone of it, and adjusted him over time up until the late 60s, and then other people did work with him, and also Donald and Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and all of that. So Disney decided to do this is interesting, and do it with maybe a level of animation quality that was a little higher than what was going on a lot of the other shows. I kind of admire that.
I do too, and I didn't watch the show in 1987, so I can't really speak to it, but looking back, it strikes me, wow, what a revelation it must have been in 1987. Just have a non-toy driven cartoon with higher quality animation standards. I mean, it's really no surprise that it was as popular as it was.
And the stories seem to me well put together. Mm-hmm. Plenty of them still have robots and lasers, and I believe both of those are mentioned in the theme song. And, a lot of the usual shenanigans, but they just seem more well constructed.
It does, and it also seems like I don't know if they alternated, but they mix in like more character-based episodes, or maybe more moral-based episodes with just pure adventure. And I think they do a really good job of combining all this. And for me, like one general comment I'd make after, watching some episodes and kind of getting into DuckTales is something that stands out is like animation quality. I mean, that can be kind of a vague term. I mean, you can kind of see it on the screen, but I think something that's there as well is just the quality of the storytelling. When things happen in a DuckTales episode, you don't have to guess at what's going on. I mean, other cartoons might take shortcuts or use limited animation spots, and it probably leads to a decrease in the storytelling. But these DuckTales plots and stories, there's some action sequences going on and things, and it just stands out to me how easy it is to follow everything that's going on. And that sounds like an obvious thing you'd want in a cartoon for kids, but it's certainly not always the case. I mean, if you combine this to a lot of like the other action cartoons of even the decade, that certainly didn't always happen back then.
Yeah, and I think from what I watched, but also what I've seen later, clips and things, the quality of that stuff kept going down. Like, I think G.I. Joe is at a higher standard than, maybe even the earlier seasons of G.I. Joe than the later seasons, or some of these other things, like those 90s Marvel cartoons, which, I don't know, I mean, the animation seems kind of awful in those.
Yeah.
They're very entertaining in their way, but this is something else, and it was hugely successful, and, they had like 3 spin-offs, 4, I think.
Yeah.
Or a whole Disney, the Chippendale Rescue Rangers and Tailspin and Darkwing Duck and Goof Troop.
Yeah, and it's less quote-unquote realistic, this environment, than other cartoons of the time. It's talking ducks in this kind of more stylized environment, but yet there's just a clarity to everything that's going on that is a lot better than a lot of these cartoons that you named.
Yeah. Now, can I tell you the thing that I was having some trouble with? And this is not necessarily only with DuckTales, but it stood out maybe more than other times. And it's frankly, it's an issue that was in Disney cartoons for a long time, which is that there are talking dogs and there are dogs.
Yes.
And it's very confusing. And some of the talking dogs have pet dogs.
Right.
Specifically, there's an episode where they go back to Castle McDuck and the old, or the cottage that he grew up in, but there's a castle that belonged to his family, and it's supposedly haunted by this, like the Hound of the Baskervilles thing, this dog. And they meet the dog, but then they've discovered that the druids that they thought they had driven out are behind the dog, and then it turns out the druids are dogs. They're talking dogs. But the ghost dog, which is really just a dog and has some sort of phosphorescent thing on it, is just a dog.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it was very frustrating.
You were agitated by this.
Yes, and then there was an episode called Aquatrazz, where Scrooge gets framed for stealing a painting and gets sent to Aquatrazz. Mm-hmm. And his cellmate is a dog. The guards are dogs, but then there are guard dogs.
Is there something like type of dogs? I mean, we know that the Beagle Boys are
beagles,
or the nemesis of Uncle Scrooge.
Yeah, and then just their dogs doing all their guards and things. I don't know. Are all of the You're saying maybe all the talking dogs are beagles?
Well, I'm speculating. I don't know.
We know there's the Goofy and Pluto issue that existed before this, but you can kind of forget that because they're not always in things together, although they're on like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse together.
Yeah,
just
this is really throwing it in your face. This
I think so.
Contrast.
When a talking dog is holding a leash with a dog at the end of it, it's confusing. And then the other thing is these ducks who seem really adverse to water or to swimming, or they use scuba gear and stuff. And I think the idea is, well, they're not really ducks. I mean, they're ducks, but they're not.
Yeah.
They're really people.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's the way you're supposed to take it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really angry.
You're unsettled a little bit.
Yeah, and amusing myself by talking to the screen and saying, but like seeing a duck react squeamishly to water, and I'm like, but you're a duck.
Right.
Also, there's one more thing, which is in the episode we're going to talk about, kilts are a big deal, right?
Yes.
And in the one with the cottage and the castle, Webby sees a picture of a young Scrooge in his kilt and says something about, well, I guess you have to be careful in the wind.
Yeah.
Which, is funny in our world with kilts and stuff. But then you look at Scrooge, Huey, Dewey, Louie, and Webby, and none of them are wearing pants. So why is it an issue? If your kilt blows up, you're just like everyone else.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, it's like you're not embarrassed to be walking around normally, but if your kilt blows up all of a sudden, that's suddenly a cause of shame.
Yeah, you don't have the choices are pants or something covering everything, or no pants. I mean, no pants or everything covered with a skirt thing that could embarrassingly reveal that you're not wearing pants.
Interesting. Well, okay, so DuckTales came out in 1987, and this was probably pre-Disney buying ABC. Right? Or did it already?
It was around the same time.
Because I'm trying to think, maybe this is a reason why that DuckTales was developed for syndication. Because I don't mean this in a negative way, Mike, but these are exactly the kind of things I could see like network notes inquiring about. Like I can envision like a long memo of them trying to get at these things and frustrating the producers of the show, and maybe the producers just saying, well, they're ducks, but they're not really ducks, and then the network being frustrated by that and that not being enough, and them having to account for that somehow within an episode,
and then like Michael Eisner having to step in maybe.
Yeah, Michael Eisner.
Like, listen, they're Disney.
Yeah.
They're animated ducks. Animated ducks don't have to wear pants.
Right.
Just like Porky Pig doesn't have to wear pants. Again, it's not just a Disney issue with the pantsless cartoon characters.
That was the brilliance of Michael Eisner. Maybe he'd be the only one that could, they'd have to have a sit down with everybody and they would have to address it if it got to that point, because you risk undermining the entire storytelling structure of, decades of Disney cartoons if you chip away at that foundation.
You might even have to bring in like Roy Disney.
Yeah, Roy.
And see, my uncle, he understood that it's just hard for a duck to wear pants the way their body's shaped. So they have feathers there. It's covered. It's fine.
That was the brilliance of Walt Disney, that he could connect with people. And that's part of that folksiness was, having ducks that didn't wear pants.
Right. They tried it with Donald.
Yeah.
And this doesn't work.
Well, on the Main Street Americana that Walt Disney remembered from growing up, the ducks walking around, did they wear pants? No.
No, they didn't even wear shirts and little funny hats.
No, they didn't. It was, pretty nice of old Roy to get in there and help settle that.
Well, he was the protector of the legacy.
Disney, it used to be about that kind of thing. And maybe, as Gino says, it's not about that anymore. I hate to think about that, but...
Could it be that on this new DuckTales they wear pants?
It could be. Maybe that's what's causing the problems here. The very thing that causes you to wonder might be the very thing that made it so successful in the first place.
Right, because, kids sometimes want to run around their underwear or whatever, right?
Yeah, and that's definitely frowned on.
So maybe... This old man doesn't wear pants. This old duck man.
I do think there's something to, not about pants here, if I can move. I agree in wearing pants. I think that's good in general in public. There's very few times where I would make exceptions to that. But I think we're talking about Disney in the 1980s. That seems to be, I think there's something to the idea that this is an era that Disney doesn't really celebrate. It's almost like they have what was it, The Little Mermaid, or was the second coming of classic Disney. And then there's a lot of stuff that led up to that maybe isn't as celebrated as much.
I've seen that on the internet, this gets classified as in terms of the animated films, the Dark Ages.
Yeah. Well, the theatrical business maybe not have been as strong as it was at this point, but there's so much stuff going on the television end, DuckTales and the syndicated Disney program being a good example. And, one thing when Disney Plus came, I think a lot of people were wondering, okay, well, maybe they'll put some of the old Disney Channel programming on, like Duck Presents. Now, there was a way to see Donald Duck cartoons on Duck Presents, which had a theme song which I dare say was even better than the DuckTales theme song. And essentially, it was a way of presenting and repackaging old Disney cartoons, that and Masterpiece Theater with George Plimpton, but that stuff's nowhere nowhere to be found on Disney Plus. There doesn't seem to be any effort to preserve the heritage of the early Disney Channel, which was a premium service that had a mixture of new and old programming. But that's when I think of the 80s and Disney, I think of theme parks for me personally and Disney Channel, and a lot of that stuff seems to be neglected by Disney right now.
I think of Oliver and Company.
You do?
And only of no, I haven't even seen Oliver and Company. I know that's one of and I think the Dark Ages includes a couple movies that I really like Robin Hood is maybe the first one in that the people categorize in that. Maybe it's anything post Walt and pre Little Mermaid. I don't
like
know.
Fox and the Hound,
Black Cauldron, and Oliver and Company, and Aristocats, which seems like that's a pretty good movie. Rescuers.
Yeah. Well, I've seen nothing but acclaim for something like DuckTales though, and I guess you could argue that hey, they rebooted it and that's celebrating it. They put it on Disney Plus, but yeah, I don't get that reverence for that part of the Disney legacy as I do for a lot of their other properties.
Now, I think with the reboot, and again, it sounds like it's not succeeding on this level for Gino, but what I've seen of it seems to me they're doing the one thing they're doing besides the look that's a little different is that they've got like the two audience things going on, where it's for kids, but it's also for their parents who grew up with the original one. So there's a nostalgia kick, but then it's trying to appeal to whatever kids like today, partly by looking more angular and like other cartoons, but still with a quality I think that some maybe don't have.
It's difficult to get that balance. When you can do it, you can come up with a fantastic show.
Yeah.
And I will say, to be fair, I think there's a lot of people that think Disney's not doing the best job of preserving its legacy over its entire history, not just any one time period. And in particular, I know a lot of people have been disappointed by what Disney Plus has done with its library and that they could be doing more to promote that. And I mean, it's not like they have all the classic cartoons up there, from the early days of Disney either. They've got a selection of them, but they've got a ways to go.
For instance, they don't have Scrooge McDuck and Money, the short that he appeared in where he teaches Huey, Dewey, and Louie about money. Because as far as I can tell, I think the search feature, that might be the most disappointing thing on there to me. Like I searched Scrooge McDuck, and the new DuckTales came up. The original one did not.
Oh, that's odd.
The Mandalorian came up.
What?
I like the Mandalorian, but there are no ducks.
I don't remember Scrooge being in the Mandalorian. Do I need to rewatch that?
It would be an interesting aspect, but a number of other things came up that. What's your algorithm doing here?
Yeah. This DuckTales should be the first thing that comes up.
Yes, Mickey's Christmas Carol, the two versions of DuckTales, and the DuckTales movie. That's all that should come.
Yeah.
or a bunch of Donald Duck cartoons even. I mean, it would be disappointing in a way if he didn't show up in them, but at least that's connected. Yeah. And there are a lot of Donald Duck cartoons on there.
There are, yeah.
Well, so should we get into this episode?
Yeah, instead of dwelling on what Disney's not doing, let's talk about something that they did do very well, and that is this series, and I think this episode is a really good one.
Yeah, and we looked at a few for possible choices, and I think you campaigned for this one, and I concurred.
I did. I If only my campaign to get more Uncle Scrooge and classic cartoons on Disney Plus was as successful as my campaign to get Once Upon a Dime chosen as our subject today.
Well, yeah, you're only dealing with one person instead of
that does many. Help. Yes, I had a highly targeted campaign, very efficient use of resources, and it did work. But
so again, I was even watching this. I did some research reading after. Like I was thinking the whole time, like, oh, this is like the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck that Don Rosa did. But then that didn't come out to the 90s. So. But it was based on things that Carl Barks had already set up.
Yeah.
They just expanded on those.
I don't know. I was familiar with some of the elements in this. I think at a certain point, it really matched a lot of stuff. And I think some other things they maybe invented for the series. But it definitely draws from a lot of the comic book source material.
Yeah. They don't quite touch on it here. But I guess Carl Barks established that Scrooge was born in the late 1800s.
Yeah, like 1867, I think.
Yeah, and there are different reasons for maybe why he's still around.
Yeah.
In the 80s, I think there's an episode of the show where he drinks from the Fountain of Youth, and it helped.
Yeah, I actually watched an episode where they find the Fountain of Youth, where they address aging without getting into specifics of it, and sort of, by the end of it, Scrooge is reconciled with the fact that he's old, and he says it's a mental thing, not a physical thing.
He's very vital.
Yeah. Oh, he is, yeah.
But in this, which has flashbacks, there's one joke that seems like that doesn't fit with the times at all. But the rest, he's taking wagons and trains and riverboats and things.
Yeah.
And it seems very not modern, but I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I do too. I like having Scrooge be in these different environments and different time periods too. It seems right.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun of that Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, which I think I've only read about half of it so far, but I really enjoy it. It fleshes out how he became the Scrooge.
Yeah, I think, right, that was the conceit of it, was like Don Rosa took like the clues and evidence from existing comics and crafted like a larger narrative, like you said, filling in the blanks and really fleshing out the entire life story of this guy, Scrooge.
Yeah, and I guess he has his own personal canon, is that Scrooge died when Carl Barks stopped working on the comic.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like 1967 or something like that.
Yeah.
So he was like 100.
He was 100, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, and just shows his reverence for Carl Barks. But yeah. Once Upon a Dime. Do we know when this aired first?
It premiered December 24th, 1987.
Wow, Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Appropriate in a way. It's a very family-centric episode.
It is, yeah. So, and this is part of like syndication. It was a weekday afternoon show, so I think like 4 or 4:30 it would be on like through most of its run. It had about 100 episodes over the course of I think 4 seasons, so like 1987 to 1990, and then ran for a long time in reruns. But I only remember DuckTales being a weekday afternoon thing, like after school.
But in the story, his calendar says kilt day, and he does put on a kilt, but it's dime polishing day.
Yeah.
So Scrooge has his number one dime. I love that he calls it that, his number one dime.
Right.
Which he keeps in a little glass case, and people are always trying to steal his number one dime. They see it as the source of his luck. I guess he sees it as the source of his luck too, but especially what's her Magica Dispel, Sorceress Duck. She's always trying to steal his number one dime.
It's not just a souvenir, but like a talisman.
Yeah, even though it's just a dime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but obviously it's not just a dime to him. So he's very excited that it's that day. The dime polishing day, and he goes to the case, and the dime has been replaced with a quarter, which is outrageous.
It is.
And he sets off all sorts of alarms and like locking down his house. And then it turns out the boys, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, borrowed it and put their lucky quarter in there, which they had used in a video game to great success.
Yeah, they won Donkey Kong, like they played it 6 times and it kept coming back or something.
Yeah.
Now, let me stop you right here. This, just when I had watched a couple of episodes and gotten comfortable with the idea of Huey, Dewey, and Louie and had more feelings of them from the comic books and how I liked them in that, they do this, which is an incredibly ignorant thing for them to do. They steal, they say they have good intentions. They say, well, it's a quarter, that's worth more than a dime, right? But it was under glass. Even if they don't know that Scrooge sees this as a day that he celebrates every year and that this particular dime is important to him, it's clearly presented and set off in a way that they should know better than to do this. It just seems really ignorant and rude of them to go in, to break in and do this without asking.
You got a good point there, and they do know how important it is. And I mean, and granted, some of these episodes are out of order or whatever, but it comes up enough.
Other people covet it so much that alone should be a signal to them, like, okay, we shouldn't just grab this without asking.
I'm sure the first time they were in the house, he was like, "This is my number one dime."
Yeah. He probably leads the tour with that, I would think.
Yeah.
Well, the rest of the episode, I loved the rest of the episode, and I didn't have any problems, but that part right there almost soiled the entire thing for me. I was like, boy, what a crazy thing for these kids to do. It really was disappointing to me. It doesn't speak well to their intelligence that they did this.
No, and I don't remember what they were borrowing it to get good luck for something else. Right?
Yeah.
Roulette.
Yeah.
Highlight? I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but I was able to forgive them. But boy, that really stood out to me as not good move by them.
Yeah. So then they're all downstairs. It's Uncle Scrooge, his butler Duckworth, who's a dog, Mrs. Beakley, the nanny, Webby, who's her niece or something, and the boys. And the boys ask, how did he get? They ask about why the dime's so important, or what's the question they ask exactly?
Well, it seems like the thing that most interests them is how did he get rich? So I guess they're interested in the story of why the dime is so important.
Yeah.
I forget how exactly they asked that, but that seems to be what they're really interested in, why it's such a big deal.
And so he begins to tell the story. So in a way, it's structured in a way like a clip show, but it's not. We go back to his childhood in Scotland at the cottage, and we learn that he first wanted to be like his father and be a bagpipe player. Only, and this is the one sort of anachronistic joke, that he wanted to play the electric bagpipes. Although it seems like an era where electricity doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
Or is in its nascent form. But, that would be a horrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
Bagpipes don't need amplification.
They certainly don't.
And his parents are like, no, you need to go, you need to get a job, basically. Work hard and you should get into business.
And they wanted him to stop playing the bagpipes, which is like a running gag throughout the episode.
That's the real thing.
That they're so horrified by his bagpipe playing that they need to get him out of the house,
Yeah.
physically away from the bagpipes.
So he goes to the bank in Glasgow or somewhere, and it's great because he just goes in and demands to be the bank president.
Yeah, well, good to start off big.
And he wants a good salary, great benefits package, and he gets kicked out on his duck keister and tries to get a job at a barber or
A telegraph. He goes to the telegraph office.
right, yeah.
And he says he got his wires crossed or something. So he basically makes one mistake.
Yeah.
And that pretty much ends that.
Right. And then he goes to a barber shop and is told he can work for tips, cleaning up and shining shoes.
Yeah, interesting. I think Scrooge demands the same benefits package and pay structure and is told he'll work for nothing, but he can get tips.
And he's okay with that.
Yeah, well, I got to start somewhere.
And so his first job is to clean this ditch digger's shoes. They show him, and it's like his shoes have so much dirt, they're like like bricks.
Yeah.
And I guess it takes him hours, and the guy tips him this American dime, but this is why it becomes important. His parents explain, well, it's worthless here, but you really need to go to America. That's where you need to earn enough money. Yeah.
I like the fact that they pointed out, and this will come back later, but the fact that, they can't, the dime is worthless here.
Yeah.
I like that, it kind of reminds us that we're in Scotland and that they acknowledge that as funny. There's a couple things before we go to America that I want to point out that I thought was interesting about this. One, Alan Young is the voice of Scrooge McDuck, and he's got like a higher pitched voice for these sequences, which is cool, and it's kind of interesting seeing the Scrooge character, because what this story does is it establishes that he wasn't always like money obsessed. He wasn't always like greedy, and actually he didn't even have ambitions to be rich per se. He didn't even get into this until later, after he did all this work and learned the value of money and everything. So I thought it was really interesting look back into early Scrooge, and that he wasn't like a caricature. He wasn't born, demanding like a solid gold pacifier or something like that, or swimming around as an infant in a crib filled with money. That he actually became that character later, and it's kind of cool to see the pre money obsessed Scrooge in this setting. I thought it was good. I think Alan Young's great, and I'm assuming it's him doing the same voice, but just putting a different spin on it. And I got to give him some props, because it's really good voice work by him to do that.
Yeah, I guess I didn't think about that, but I noticed the voice difference, but I didn't think about whether it was him, but that makes sense. And he's great as Scrooge.
Yeah.
And of course, Alan Young from Mr. Ed, many other things. I guess that element is from the comics, but they, of course, they also softened him a little bit for this. Made him more about hard work and thrift, or not hard work, smart work, as his McPapa tells him.
Yeah.
Work smarter, not harder, which frankly is good advice.
It is. And a lot of times too in the comic books, when you see Scrooge, he's almost got like a perpetual like just his like a grimace, or it kind of looks like a little he looks crabbier. His eyebrows are different, and he doesn't walk around like that in DuckTales. I'm not complaining about it, but it is a little bit of a different character.
Yeah, he's a little edgier.
Yes.
Although, there are episodes of this where he does love money, and
yeah.
I guess that even happens here. But one of the ones I watched, he was counting money. I love money. I love money. Oh.
I think he's not as he's a lot more paranoid in the comics too, and he's more distrustful of his own relatives, not just everybody else, especially Donald. I guess. I think he doesn't think very well. He thinks Donald's kind of a ne'er-do-well.
Well, Donald does have his speech issues. Although, frankly, in the comics, that's one thing when I've read some, I stumble on a little bit. I'm like, because I want to hear Donald's voice in my head.
Yeah.
His cartoon voice, but he's speaking in very clear sentences, and
yeah,
I can't quite make the leap.
That's true. Well, and again, it kind of goes to like how rational he is. Like I think in like the comic books, Karl Barks had a way of getting lessons and morals across without being overbearing, and I think that's something else that DuckTales does well. But a lot of times, Donald and the kids were the ones teaching Scrooge the lessons. So Donald isn't like the madman that he was in a lot of the cartoons. And Scrooge was the one who needed to learn the lessons, and he would learn them, but he'd have to be led there.
Well, that's part of being a Scrooge. Really, the tradition of being a Scrooge is learning as much as being miserly.
That's right. There's a journey that every good Scrooge goes on.
That's right.
So this Scrooge's journey takes him to America.
America, yes. The big city. New York, I guess, or maybe that's a duck. There's a Statue of Liberty that's a duck.
Yeah.
And he gets there, and of course he's in his kilt and everything. And he earns money quickly as the shoes shine before he leaves. He uses his McPapa's suspenders and attaches them to a bike, and is able to be more efficient as
like an automated shoe shine system.
Yeah.
With him powering it, but yeah, very good, very clever.
And then he goes there. He immediately gets arrested for wearing the kilt, which they think is a skirt, and that's highly offensive.
Yeah.
You know, it's a dog, then arrest him. It's not a duck. So the whole pants issue is not, it's not as big a deal in this episode, I would say.
It's not, but there's a lot of questions raised by this scene. There's gender issues, dog versus duck issues, and immigration issues. There's a kind of a lot going on just in this one moment here.
Yeah, and he spends a little time in a cell with some beagle boys, probably parents or grandparents of the...
Yeah.
Although Mom Beagle shows up, I believe. So
Yeah.
she's still around. Or maybe they just pass on that name. And he has to use his dime for bail, so he doesn't have his number one dime. And they go before the judge, and the cop who arrested him says some offensive things about Scottish people.
Yeah.
And it turns out the judge is Scottish, too, and wearing a kilt under his robe.
He sentences the cop to 30 days. 30 days not in jail, 30 days of wearing a kilt.
Yeah, boy, that's one of those things you would hear about on the news, like now, every now and then.
Yeah.
Wacky judge
Yeah.
sentences man to wear kilts for 30 days.
Believe it or not. I'm not sure if this affirms my faith in the judicial system or weakens it. It's an unconventional way of handling the case, but ultimately, I guess justice is indeed served for Scrooge, at least.
Right. I mean, on the one hand, I don't think Scrooge deserved to get arrested.
No.
In the first place.
That was a frivolous arrest, for sure.
But is this a case of an activist judge run amok?
It seems like it, and it also maybe speaks to the clannishness of early, politics and the legal system back in the 19th century, right, where you'd have like everything be politics was all on ethnic lines, and this is a Scottish judge, like doesn't even seem to be concerned with the merits of the case, but he's like, hey, I'm going to do a thing for another Scotsman here, and our peoples are being persecuted here, and let's get back at this guy.
Yeah, and you'd think the dog would be Irish. As a 19th century cop.
You know what? I'm amazed that they didn't do that.
Yeah. I guess maybe they thought it would be too confusing.
Maybe, yeah.
So then Scrooge goes hitchhiking because he wants to go find his uncle Catfish. He's named Catfish. He's not Catfish. I mean, he does have a weird mustache, but he is a duck. And he puts out his leg. And a woman picks him up.
I laughed out loud at that. He's on the side of the road, yeah, and he pulls up his...
His kilt.
His kilt, yeah, and reveals some leg, and that gets him a lift. Now, that was I think there's some voiceover going on at the time. It's kind of a quick moment, but I did laugh out loud at that. That was good.
He finds his Uncle Catfish, who's not doing as well as he thought he was. He's on kind of this dilapidated riverboat, and he wants this plantation that he was promised, and Nemesis Old Man Ribbit.
I love Old Man Ribbit. Old Man Ribbit's great.
He's a frog, obviously, and a bit of a dandy as a frog. What do you say? He's wearing like a boater hat or something.
Yeah, I guess like it's like a Cajun, like a form of Cajun dandyism, like maybe a...
Yeah, that's right. He is a Cajun.
I think maybe Old Man Ribbit is like the idea of sort of a gentleman from the French Quarter in that time period. Like you could see him, maybe a gambler I could almost see, but like with a boutonniere and that sort of thing. All the accoutrements of maybe a gentleman gambler, but
yeah,
he's got a good look, but it kind of fits in with that whole riverboat atmosphere.
Catfish refers to him as a Cajun. So they want to have a duel, and Scrooge intervenes and suggests that they have a riverboat race instead.
Right.
So they agree to it, and they go have this race, and Old Man Ribbit does some cheating with the help of the Beaver Boys. Not to be
the Beaver
confused
Boys.
with
That was
the
kind
Beaver
of interesting group there.
Yeah, they chop down some trees and cause some issues, and it seems like there's no way they're going to win, and they're going to lose everything. But then Catfish's suspenders get caught in the paddle wheel, and Scrooge frees him, and then they're down in the where the furnace is, and Catfish takes off his suspenders and is mad at them, and Scrooge is able to put it together what he did with the shoe shine thing before, and able to again fill up the furnace faster using the suspenders and some
and old shoes. He finds a pile of old shoes and throws them into the furnace, which makes the boat go faster.
Oh.
No.
Okay.
I don't think that's... No. It would be nice if that's what had happened.
It would be. I don't know if that would help or not.
I think it's, I guess, yes, like you said, it's the motion, that kind of perpetual motion thing it gets going there, which helps them speed up.
Right. And they win, and Catfish teaches them a harsh lesson. Unintentionally, but it's a harsh lesson, which is you can help someone, but that doesn't mean you get to be their half of what they win. Yeah,
that was a real sudden heel turn by Uncle Catfish. I was very disappointed by him, but like you said, Scrooge does learn from it.
He's got to go make it on his own. And Catfish does give him $50. So, if you count the dime, now he's got 60 cents.
He does, but that's a far cry from having half of the plantation and being partners with him. But
frankly, I'm fine with that. I don't really want Scrooge to have been a plantation owner.
Yeah, I think, and Scrooge does move on to other things, so... it works out well for him, but
Yeah, he moves on to exploiting
yeah.
exploiting nature. But
Yes.
Yeah, and next he goes to the Klondike, where he works all winter to dig up gold, and he quote unquote freezes his assets off.
Yeah, that was another good one. They had another one, like kind of a visual gag too, where he says, I think when he gets thrown out of the bank or the telegraph office, where he says he realized he had to start from the bottom, and he's kind of rubbing his booty after getting thrown on it. And the voiceover says he has to start from the bottom. So yeah, that was good. Freezing his assets. I enjoyed that.
And the kids ask, so is that when you got rich? And he's like, well, no, I was making money, but I didn't feel rich yet.
Yeah, he was missing something.
So next he buys some timberland.
Yes, but actually, there's one thing I wanted to point out because it made me laugh. I think it was after he'd established himself in the Klondike. He sends money back to his parents, and I laughed again because he was proud because he was able to make enough money to send back to his folks, and they're like opening up, and it's like American money is like, yeah, he sent us money, but like this is American money. How are we going to use this here? And they just have this like puzzled look and like kind of like despairing look on their face, and that's it. Like that's the scene is like it's just they just do it for the gag. They don't figure out a way to convert it or anything. They just can't use that money, and I like the fact that they came back to that.
Yeah, money exchangers didn't exist yet,
yeah,
I guess.
It was an example of one of the things I love about this episode is that they're combining like running jokes and humor, but they're getting in and out with the little jokes, but it's not really obstructing the story. They're still telling the story and actually finding a way for these little comic moments too. It was very well done.
Yeah. So he buys his Oklahoma timberland, which frankly, even before we found out, didn't sound very promising to me.
No.
That's not an area I think of when I think of timberland.
No. You don't think of Paul Bunyan roaming the flatlands of Oklahoma.
No. But to get there, he also buys a train, but he possibly from the same guy, but there are no tracks. So he hires some people or some dogs and various other animals to build tracks as he goes. And he's going to pay them when they get to the end. And he has his timberland. Mm-hmm. And then they get attacked by the Beagle Boys, and Ma Beagle blows the safe, and the only thing in it is a #1 dime. And so she does take the dime, and he's not happy about that, and finds him in a cave, and all his clothes got blown off too.
Yeah, so she's got the dime and is killed.
Yes, and he does feel the need to cover up with some leaves of some kind.
Right.
Although there's one shot of him like flying duck naked.
Yeah.
I've said my piece about it. And then he plays the bagpipes to drive them out of the cave and gets all his stuff back.
Yeah, that was good. Again, they've established the fact that his bagpipe playing is horrible, and here it's enough to drive them out of the cave and get them away.
And his costume by now is he's still wearing the kilt, but he does have the blue and red coat.
Yeah, and it was interesting that he got a posse, I guess, of his employees like to accompany him too.
Yeah.
Even though they apparently haven't been paid yet, and they're kind of working on spec. It was kind of cool that they were his muscle. He didn't go in here alone.
Right, but then when they get to Oklahoma and there are no trees, they get fed up.
Yeah.
There's going to be a revolt, so he buries his dime to protect it after having lost it twice now. And while doing that, he strikes oil.
Yeah, and then there you go. There's the oil money, and he's pretty much set from this point.
But he's not rich yet.
No, he's not rich.
So, what could he do next? And he's at some party, and there are these, like, snooty pigs there. I'm not familiar with these pigs.
No, they certainly seem like snooty old money, I guess.
Yeah, they mention their diamond mines in Africa, and he's not very interested in that. But there's, like, a coal field next to it, and he wants to buy that. And
Yeah.
Like, fine.
It was interesting. I like kind of like from a business sense, kind of the zig where they zag, or there's zag, or however you want to call it. And he wants the big part in the map that nobody else wants.
Yeah.
And they think it's worthless because who needs coal in Africa?
That's right, yeah, which seems weird. You still need something to...
Yeah, the whole thing...
The fires.
It was kind of a sketchy analysis of mineral resources and the natural resources of Africa. But
Again, I was glad he didn't get too involved in diamond mining in
No.
South Africa.
yeah.
But he does. He goes to his land, and he goes to the land, and he sees an opportunity to work smarter. So he imports all these peanuts,
Right.
and throws them on the land, and the pigs think that's ridiculous, and you can't grow peanuts in Africa. Again, I'm not sure about the veracity of that.
Right.
And all these elephants charge in and stomp on the coal and turn it into diamonds, which is scientifically sound, right?
Yeah. Of course. It's a roundabout way to get there, but...
I mean, if Superman can hold a lump of coal in his hand and crush it into a diamond.
Yeah.
Why not? I assume elephant trampling.
I guess what the main thing was, Scrooge saw that there'd be access to land and access to elephants.
Yeah.
So that he could make the diamonds in
And
here
coal.
rather than... Yeah, right. And the coal, yeah. Because it seems like a long way to go to do that, but he saw an opportunity and took advantage of it, so good for him.
Yeah. And the pigs ask him, well, can we get some peanuts? And he's like, you sure can. You can buy them from McDuck peanut importers. Now, that's really working smart.
Yeah. He's already cornered the market on peanuts. That was smart. Before exposing this scheme, he made sure he had his peanut house in order.
And now he's rolling in the dough. Truly rolling in the dough so much that he has to finally build the money bin.
Yes, the infamous money bin of comic fame, where he likes to dive around in it and swim in it,
Which they show.
throw it up and let it hit him on the top of the head.
I was happy. I mean, they show it in the credits, but he doesn't do that in every episode, obviously. I was happy that he swam in it in this one, and then, we got a little more at the end. It was his first, they showed his first swim.
Yeah.
And he even pointed out, which I still like to do today.
Why not? The money bin is awesome. That's one of my favorite things about Uncle Scrooge. And I think they even established in one story that he's like kind of built up a tolerance to having the money clank on his head. Because I think one time somebody else got in there like a Beagle Boy and knocked himself unconscious because he wasn't, he just didn't have the noggin for it.
Right. I guess he wouldn't need to. So he's got like a thicker, like a calloused layer
Something
of
like
skin.
that, yeah.
And dogs are notoriously soft-headed.
Yeah, that's true.
But this then leads to the warm-hearted conclusion of this episode, which is even then he didn't feel rich. He didn't feel rich until Donald dumped his nephews.
Well, yes. He enlisted...
Right, in the story of... Right, he's in the Navy. Donald joined the Navy. Had to leave Huey, Dewey, and Louie with Great Uncle Scrooge. Mm-hmm. And then he had to hire Mrs. Beakley, and Webby's there, so... And even Duckworth.
Yeah, even Duckworth. Even my domestic.
That he's got a family now, and that makes him feel rich. Which, that's a very nice message.
It is, and it seemed heartfelt and sincere and not, like, tacked on. I really think they did a brilliant job of doing it because, like, periodically after these little vignettes, like you mentioned, the kids would ask him, is that when you were rich and everything? And he said, well, no, not quite. And very well-structured episode. They accomplished a lot here in the 20-some minutes and a really nice ending.
And it seemed like he was just coming to that conclusion. Like he wasn't telling the story in order to get to the conclusion. That when he says it, it's just dawned on him, like, oh, yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah, that's a good point.
And then everyone goes for a swim in the money bin.
As long as they don't throw it up and hit themselves in the head with it, I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, we don't want any injuries. Maybe the boys have some sort of lining in their hats.
Could be, yeah.
But I really enjoyed it. Of the ones I watched, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 maybe, but this is certainly one of the top ones, maybe the best one I watched.
Yeah, I think I looked at a couple, because, Gino gave the recommendation, but we were just kind of looking for like a single contained episode, and this seemed to crop up as a recommendation, people. And I was kind of interested in how they would tell the story, sort of the origin story. And yeah, I think it was really an excellent episode. It was funny, heartfelt, told a good story, and structured well. I really liked everything about this except for the nephews pulling that stunt at the beginning that I resented. Other than that, I really enjoyed it. I think it's actually probably my favorite of like the handful I've watched for this.
Yeah, I think so. Watch one involving a genie and Flint Heart Glomgold. Mm-hmm. Watch the first one that's on there, which involves Magica Dispel. Yeah. The one at the castle and the Aquatrazz. I think that might be it. They all have worth, I think.
Yeah, there's one I saw. They decided to run a hotel.
Oh, yeah. I saw that title.
Hotel Strange Duck or something like that. And I think that's actually, it's funny. It's kind of like got some like Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein style mystery horror comedy. And the one I mentioned about them looking for the Fountain of Youth was good for the way it had these adventure elements with like a mysterious conquistador and, an exotic locale, and also made a point at the end, with age being a state of mind, and you're as young as you feel. And I'm really impressed with the series. One thing is like, it doesn't look great on Disney Plus.
No, I mean, it looks like standard definition.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that they should they need to do a bunch of stuff to it, but if you haven't seen it before, that could be one thing that might be a little jarring at first. I think it's good in a way that they're not, they're showing it in its original aspect ratio, I think, and they haven't messed it up like they did with some other things, but it kind of shows its age. I think that's one thing. I don't know what they could do to it, but it kind of adds to the impression. I guess at least it's on there, but it's not like they've done it like a big digitally remastering job on it or anything like that.
But yeah, it's there and the stories are there, and I guess too, if you like the new ones, or your kids, or your 2 to 11-year-olds, and you're watching the new ones, these old ones are there too. And definitely, if you're into comics and enjoy this, I would, even though I've only read a handful of the comics, I would definitely recommend those too, because they are fun, and there's a great deal of, if you're into the craft of comics, and the Carl Barks ones especially, there's a great deal to learn there, I think.
I don't think every episode is like an adventure-based episode, but there's ones that it seems like these ones that tell these stories do capture the feel of the comics, and it feels unique in a way that, like, again, kind of going back to other cartoons of that era, they were maybe more conflict-based or like warring factions. And yeah, you do have Scrooge against the Beagle Boys and some of his nemesis, but you also have these episodes where they just go off on an adventure just because it's cool. There's like a spirit of like fun to it and daring do and that kind of thing, and just kind of the thing they mentioned in the theme song. They set it up for you by establishing this, and I think that's pretty cool. It seemed like there weren't necessarily enough cartoons like that. I mean, maybe like Johnny Quest in the day. I guess they had like missions and things like that, but just pure adventure cartoons where they were just going out and kind of doing cool things. That's another thing, like DuckTales kind of takes you back there, I think.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of trivia.
Oh, love trivia.
Yeah.
Let's go for it.
So recently in our Batty Awards, of course, we gave the Genius Award to Mr. Jeffrey Scott, writer of many cartoons. And I believe when recording it and I was looking at credits, I did notice that he had done a few episodes of DuckTales. So I had to look these up. Haven't watched any of them. They're all from the 1990, the last season. So outside of our era. That doesn't mean I'm not going to watch them, though. And season 4, although the way they're organized on Disney Plus, I'm not sure I think they're probably in season 3. Yeah, I think they only have 3 seasons listed.
I think you're right, yeah. The last season was like a batch. It wasn't like what we'd consider a full season, right? It was like a handful or like under 10 maybe.
Right. So episode 2 of season 4, Attack of the Metal Mites. That sounds kind of Jeffrey Scott.
Yeah, I can see that.
Episode 4, the very ill-titled New Gizmo Kids on the Block.
Wow.
1990.
Yeah, okay, that's...
And then a 2-parter, episodes 6 and 7, The Golden Goose, parts 1 and 2. So for you Jeffrey Scott fans, you DuckTale fans.
Yeah, you Howard Hughes fans, the last one, it sounds like.
That could be, or maybe you're Fred Silverman fans. I don't know. But yeah, those are out there for you.
Cool. That's good to know. I'm curious and appalled by New Gizmo Kids on the Block.
I am too. The Gizmo, that gives me hope at least that it involves gizmos and not Huey, Dewey, and Louie forming a boy band.
Yeah. Well, you got me curious now. I will check this out. But yeah, you can't necessarily judge an episode by its title, right? So
you can't, and yet I'm really having a hard time not judging it.
Yeah. Well, it's good that Jeffrey Scott found his way into the Duck franchise.
Yeah.
It looks like they had a batch of like 65 episodes, and that was like the heart of DuckTales. And then they came up, it was successful. I think they came out with some shorter seasons, but again, I don't know. I didn't really watch the show, but it seems like that core 65 is really probably the heart of the show. And then maybe like in seasons 3 and 4, they were just kind of like throwing on episodes to kind of flesh out the rerun package. And, I guess they got to 100 episodes, but it seems like maybe the essence of the show is in its first. And it seemed like, to me, like a lot of the more interesting stories, it seemed like they showed up like earlier in I say earlier, but maybe that quote unquote first season.
Right. I mean, it looked like they introduced more characters in the later. That there's like some cave duck named Bubba, and I think Gino mentioned his email. Like there's a sort of robot dude or something. I don't know what his deal is. So I don't know if those are good or bad. And I think there's some kind of pig. But to me, that first batch looked the most appealing.
Right.
But anyway, thank you to Gino for suggesting this.
Yeah, I really enjoy discovering this show, and I think it was a cool one to talk about and kind of get back into 1980s cartoons and some cartoons that actually made sense. It was interesting.
I just noticed that you put a dime on the table.
Total coincidence.
Really?
Or is it?
Or is it? Yeah.
It actually is.
Okay.
Uncle Scrooge was deliberate, but the dime, I think, is left over from, previous, just change from the pocket. But
okay,
maybe it's Providence that brought that dime there to the table.
Maybe you need to put that dime on glass.
Maybe I should. And
it's our number one dime.
Okay, from now on, it will be our number one dime.
That's good. I think everyone needs a number one dime.
I definitely didn't already have a number one dime.
No.
I had a cool $2 bill that I used to keep around, but I'm not even sure where that is. So
money's not for keeping. Scrooge might disagree with this.
Money's for spending.
Exactly.
This episode brought to you by capitalism.
That's right. We would be the consumers, and Scrooge would be the, what do you call those?
Not sure.
The people that earn money off the backs of consumers.
The one percenters?
Yes. The Wikipedia article about Scrooge McDuck has a section in it with a number of times Forbes has estimated his wealth. Based on evidence, I guess, from the comics and the show and inflation. He's quite rich.
Yeah.
A billionaire.
We're not talking like tech giant money, but he's got money.
Yeah, well, it seemed like to be in the 50s of billions or something.
And hopefully he's diversified from his oil holdings now, that he's not relying on that, because that now's not a good time to be.
I think with his interest in inventions and technology, he would be willing to try, and his interest in trying different things, that he would be fine with like going into some more newer energy technology.
He does seem to be willing to spend money to make money, despite his reputation for being stingy. He's willing to invest.
Yeah.
Very smart.
Right. Work smarter, not harder.
Well, I'm going to invest. I'm not going to invest this dime. I'm going to keep it as our own talisman, and maybe good things will happen to us in the podcast.
I hope so.
As long as we hang on to this dime.
Yes, maybe we'll have a mysterious investor.
That would be nice.
A duck investor.
It's always welcome, any kind of investor.
Okay, that's it from Duckburg.
This episode brought to you by beautiful downtown Duckburg. This episode also brought to you by McDuck Peanut Importers, working smarter, not harder. This episode also brought to you by Duck, 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 Goose. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.